Okay, thanks for having me here today. Uh, how many have paddled up in Northeast South Dakota on the lakes? Good, most of you, or a lot of you. So I always kind of think we're the paddlers that go on the water that doesn't move. Because a lot of the people I run into is like, oh yeah, we just paddle the rivers and stuff. But there's a lot of opportunities we'll talk about up in Northeast South Dakota for kayaking, and we trying to get some more amenities up there, and that's kind of what I'll talk about. So this whole thing started. For those who don't know, my wife has been or was a state park manager for about almost 40 years. And so we were at Pickerel Lake for 30 some years and Roy Lake for the last 4 years. Um, my daughter actually went to work for the North Dakota state parks, and her first station was up at Lake Metigoshi, which is in the Turtle Mountains, way up on the North Dakota-Canada border. Has anybody been up there? If you ever get a chance, the Turtle Mountains is kind of an oddity in North Dakota. It's kind of like the Prairie Coteau. It's a big glacial uplift, and it's all deciduous and all kinds of wetlands and lakes up there. So she was up there, and we started going up there, and they had some really nice kayak trails up there with portages and all kinds of things to go through. And so this is what they had up there. Um, we always stayed in a cabin here, but their dock was down here. You could go through school section and a couple sloughs, and there was creeks. Ended up into Aramash Lake, which is right on the Canada border. And then there was another portage through there. And I kind of was jealous because there's not much like that up in Northeast South Dakota or even any of the state parks. They also had some really nice kayak docks. So this one, has anybody ever seen one like this? This is for the handicap. And so there is actually where you can pull a wheelchair up here and slide into the kayak. Uh, Now, one thing about North Dakota state parks, there's about only 12 state parks in North Dakota. So they have a lot of money and they have a lot of really nice amenities. Most of them have nature centers. They all have really nice outdoor amphitheaters, stuff like that. So we kind of got back, and I was talking to my wife, who was that time was the district manager for that area. So she was in charge of Pickerel, and Ryan. It's like, how come we don't have kayak docks here? And she was like, I don't know. So that's kind of where the idea came from, was my daughter up in North Dakota. So one of the other things I was involved with, most of you know Roger Foote. Roger Foote was the coordinator for the Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project. I was the coordinator for the one north, which was called the Glacial Lakes. And so one of the things that also with the watershed projects was we need to get people more involved with our resources. If you don't use a lake, do you care whether it's polluted or not? Probably not. And so we wanted to get people involved in more activities on the lakes and stuff up there. And so one of the things another reason for putting in these kayak trails and stuff was to get people out on these lakes. So we came up with some criteria for what we wanted to look for what water bodies for putting in these kayak things. The first thing, they had to be meandered. How many know what meandered means? Okay, so meandered means that they were surveyed way back, and they are considered public waters. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that is because of the whole flooding and stuff up in Northeast South Dakota, and there's been all kinds of lawsuits and discussions about what is a public water. So we wanted to make sure that they were meandered. The other thing is we wanted to have public access. I didn't want to have to go through meeting with private landowners and stuff, getting permission, and talk about liability and all that stuff. So, and most of the public access is either going to be with the game fish and parks, whether that's park land or wildlife land, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That we wanted to have a maintained access road. I didn't want to have dirt trails and stuff that would be muddy, and if you were taking your car down there, you might get stuck and stuff. Parking area, easily accessible shoreline, and kind of the big thing was minimal use by recreational power boats. If any of you have been on lakes like Pickerel and stuff in the 4th of July, you don't want to be out there in a kayak. So those were kind of our criteria for what we were looking for. So we went out and paddled all the lakes, looked at the access areas, kind of followed those criteria. This is South Buffalo Lake. There's North and South Buffalo. This is up in Marshall County. A really nice lake, all kinds of islands and bays. Not much development. There's maybe a dozen houses on the east side, and that's pretty much it. There's some tribal housing along there, but it's real minimum. One of the reasons this lake is developed is it is mostly land owned by the Sisseton Wampanoag, whether that's trust land or BIA land. So not much development. One of the things we found exploring South Buffalo is somebody had lost their canoe. I have no idea what the story is on this, but this was in a back bay. This canoe was up on shore. So that was one of the fun things. So here's kind of our finalists that we came up with for up there. Most of these lakes on this list are not developed. They don't have any cabins or anything on it first. Abraham Lake, Bullhead, 4 Mile, and Roy, we'll talk about that, why those are kind of lumped together. Isabel Lake, Mud Lake, 6 Mile Lake, South Buffalo, South Red Iron, and then in Roberts County, One Road Lake and Whitestone Lake. Does anybody know why 6 Mile Lake is called 6 Mile Lake? We have a 2 Mile lake in Marshall County, a 4 Mile, a 6 Mile, and a 9 Mile. Those were all named, they were the distance from Fort Sisseton. So just a little history thing. So that's why you see those lakes up there. Because people always ask, well, why is it 6 Mile Lake? Well, it's 6 miles from what? Fort Sisseton. So these are the lakes that we came up with. And then we started thinking about, well, what should we do for trails and stuff? And these are kind of the lakes that we established trails on. And these were up on a website at one time for the project. They're not right now. This might be something that we can put up on your website together. So Abraham Lake up in Marshall County. And we kind of just made the routes around the outside of the lake just so people would get an idea of how many miles they were, kind of figure out, okay, how long would it take me to get around the lake? It's not an established trail like going down the river. So it's not. So you can kind of read, we kind of put on the websites mileage from where, points that people might know, what was actually there for parking, things like that. Abraham Lake is GPS. There's a parking area here. Isabel Lake, the parking here is a little not quite as good. That is a waterfowl production area. So there is parking right there, but you kind of have to go into a ditch. The approach isn't very good. And I think I kind of mentioned that maybe. These are very pretty lakes. I don't know if you've ever been up to there. There's pretty much native prairie around some of these. There's riparian woods, quaking aspen, that kind of thing. You kind of get a Fergus Falls kind of vibe, that kind of woodland area in Minnesota vibe with some of these lakes up there. Hoop Lake is another one that I would really like to get people on. It's mainly tribal and BIA land. And the tribe was really interested in doing things. It's just we never got far enough along in the process to get some of these other lakes put on the list. Mud Lake, right above Seachy Hollow. And this is a really beautiful lake. Got some bays to get back into. There's some parking here. There's actually a couple places to park. It is mowed by the Wildlife Division once in a while. One Road Lake is in Roberts County, and this is all game production area and waterfowl production area. Some really nice native prairie here. There's two parts of the lake divided by the road. There's a real nice kind of gravel parking lot there. So, but again, some islands, lots of back bays to explore. All of these lakes have, if you're a bird watcher, is a really good place to go because there's different kinds of grebes. There's loons up there once in a while, pelicans, gulls. So it's kind of a real birdie place to go on to. Kind of what we put our most effort into was the Roy Lake, Bullhead, and 4 Mile Lake. Again, remember that? It's 4 miles from the Fort Sisseton. They already had a launch area kind of right in here established. That's where they had their kayaks that they were renting. They had a shed there with their life jackets and stuff in there. But we started exploring this, and so this is the main part of Roy Lake. Most of the development is on this shore. Again, Roy Lake doesn't have a lot of development because the state owns probably about 75% of the shoreline. So not much development. And they have all these really back bays and stuff that you can get into. One of the first things I noticed when we started going up here is there's a lot of vegetation back in those back bays. It's shallow, probably only about 9-10 feet deep. So you don't kind of midsummer when the vegetation, aquatic vegetation grows up, you don't get a lot of boats going back in there to fish and stuff. So that was kind of one thing that kind of clicked right away. It's like, yeah, there's not much jet skis and stuff. And most of the development's over here. So the people tend to boat kind of over here in this area. So this is kind of the east or the west arm of Roy. And then we've got Bullhead Lake here. There is kind of a small drainage between those, but it gets really a lot of cattails and stuff growing up, so you can't get in there. And so we developed a portage kind of through here. And then this is 4 Mile. And there is a low water crossing right here that most of the time there's water, you can just kind of paddle across there. So again, there's lots of islands and stuff out here to explore. It's mainly wooded and prairie. And again, just kind of a really nice place to bird and stuff. And we'll see if we can get this to work. So this is our winter make you want to get out in the spring and paddle. So this is back on Roy Lake. And it's a little harder to see on the screen. But again, it's really woody. It tends to be no matter which way the wind's out of, you can find a spot to get out of the wind and go back in there. So I kind of get an idea of the shoreline. You don't see any cabins. You don't see cropland or anything like that. A lot of beaver. I've seen otter back in there. We've run across coyotes. The aquatic invertebrate guy and me had to take pictures of the whirligig beetles. And no, I didn't hit the stump. That kind of gives you the idea of what it's like up there. Pretty much every year during the 4th of July, we do kind of a sunset paddle up there. that we get people to go out on. So we did get some maps made that kind of show the route, and this is by the launch area on Roy. There's another sign just like this at the boat ramp on Bullhead, so you can put in there. We did at that time, I don't know if he's mowing it or not. It was mowed last summer, but this is kind of the portage between Roy, which is over here, and Bullhead down here. We do have some portage signs out there so you can find your way around. And then we started talking about getting the kayak docks up there. And so we talked to Rhett Russell, who was the kind of the dock guy up with Wildlife there. And at that time, they were just starting to get the money from the habitat stamps. This was one of the things that they could use that money. So when you buy a fishing license or stuff, you pay that additional, I think it's $10, which goes into a pool of money. And this is actually one thing. So these were the docks we were looking at. This is pretty close to the one that was up at Metigoshi. At that time, this was probably, I'd say 2016 or 2017. These were the costs of those two types of docks. So this is the real fancy handicapped accessible one, and this is more of your typical type. So we started talking about that, and then unfortunately everybody up there got interested in kayak docks. And so we wanted to get one at Roy and then one at the portage of Bullhead, because you get off there, it's kind of silty and stuff, so it's kind of like the Big Sur River. You sink up to your knees in the mud. And we did get quite a few docks up there. Unfortunately, we ended up with only one at Roy. I still don't know how that happened. But so right now, these are all the locations. There's one in Big Stone. It's Smith's GPA is kind of down by closer to Big Stone City. If you know where Chamberlain Island is, Rhett's big plans for there was actually to put some shelters out on Chamberlain Island. That's all state for kayakers. So Pelican Lake has one. Pickerel has two. We got the one at Roy. There's three in Watertown that he got. Forestburg City Park and the Yahota Gravel Pit are all kind of on the northeast corner of Campesca, and then one on the Big Sur River at 3rd Avenue. And so these are kind of what we ended up with. This is the one at Pickrel. This is the one at Yahota, which I think is an old gravel pit. And again, these were all furnished by or funded by the habitat stamp revenue. They've all got signs there kind of denoting that that's what that money, or that's how those were funded. One of the other things we talked about, and kind of tying in with your hammock, was some of these shelters. These are all kind of came out of Minnesota, and they're just little shelters that you put out in some of the areas that you either canoe or hike to. One of the other things we talked about too is actually putting hooks in there to hang up hammocks, and then also maybe just putting posts out there far enough apart that you could string hammocks on. So none of these got built yet, but we kind of looked into pricing and where to put them. Bullhead was probably where we were putting them, because there is a pit toilet at the boat access, which isn't too far from where we would put these out on the island. So, and again, this is Roy, Bullhead. You get really nice sunsets up there. And this is one of our evening sunset kayak classes that we had up there. So it's kind of a work in progress. It's a little harder now that both me and my wife retired in 2023, and now we're living down here. There's been a lot of change in, I think we've had we're on the second district manager since we left. The second or third park manager, and there is an assistant manager. And Jen over here, who's at Oakland, raise your hand, Oakwood, does a lot of kayaking and stuff on Oakwood. I don't know if you've got established trails or anything, do you? Not really. Okay.
There are two canoe and kayak boat ramps there, though.
Yeah.
Campground 2 had one, and one in this one beach.
Yeah. And were yours funded by the Habitat, or did you? Oh, you don't know. Okay. But they are starting to pop up a little more, so we're kind of getting. Now, the one problem with kayak docks, and I've had this problem at Family Park in town here, is they become fishing docks. I don't know if anybody's had that experience, but I think 2 out of the 3 times I went out to Family Park to launch a kayak, the people wouldn't move. They said, "Nah, we were here first, we're fishing." And that's Sioux Falls Park. So there is kind of a vague law that would apply to kayak docks. I talked to the COs when we were doing this up in Northeast South Dakota, that you cannot prohibit or inhibit a boat being launched on a boat ramp. So like if you had a boat ramp at Pickerel stuff and you sat your lawn chair in the middle of that or sat up in the dock and a boat comes in to launch, you need to move. It's kind of more vague on kayak docks when I went and talked to COs. So I don't know if you've ever run into that, but that kind of happens. And like I said, Family Park, I've had people just say, "Yeah, we're not moving. Go use the boat ramp." So, any questions?
Why don't they just put a sign up there, you know?
Yeah,
Or
again,
something. That way they know.
Yeah.
They know they gotta move.
again, it's kind of vague law. I don't know if you've had people complain about that on Oakwood or not, but
Not really.
yeah.
We had to do something. It's not efficient. But we just would like.
Right. Yeah.
The one at the swim beach is pretty easy because no fishing.
Yeah.
Dennis, question, you ever try working with a scouting troops up there and looking, or used to be a random legal project?
Yeah,
For sure.
the scouts aren't doing really good.
Okay. Just throwing it out.
The Webster is kind of dead and gone. Millbank's dying. Watertown's not too bad. Sisseton's still going. But yeah, Mike had actually put in some bridges up on Pickrel going across some of the creeks and stuff for a hiking trail, but there's possibilities. I think it's just gonna, I haven't talked to Rhett much longer, but I'm kind of hoping now that things have kind of settled as far as personnel up at Roy, that we kind of get back on track up there and maybe get some more stuff done. But it's just, and money is always a thing too. They've only got so much money, and you know, every park wants a dock now. There's a lot of parks that still don't have much for kayak docks and stuff. So, any other questions?
What really makes a kayak dock?
You don't get wet, for one thing.
How it goes down into the water?
Yeah, most of them. Let's see. Go back here quick.
Some things that look like you might say kayak and excited, but
So, okay, so what you can come up. What I like to do is just put my kayak on short pinion, push it so it starts to get up here, walk out there, pull it up, and it's kind of hard to see here, but there are slots that you can put your oars across, and so you get in there and you just kind of slide yourself into the water. So I like to use them more when the water's cold, either early spring or late fall, so you don't get wet. So
Are they 50? I mean, can you put a kayak in there, get in and get out?
yeah, yep. And then of course, this one here, you can pull the wheelchair up and you can slide into so it's kind of a handicap accessible thing too. I don't know if there's any like this down here. There might be out at Pahoja on the Iowa side. So it's kind of I don't know.
So do they always have that, or can there be something that just kind of gets right down close to the water, so you can just like put your paddle on the dock and the other one on the center of the kayak and sit down on it?
Well, and it kind of depends on the type of dock. If you've got these floating docks here, now like the typical docks of boat ramps, they're about that far off the water. But if you just had this dock here, yeah, you can get your kayak and get down in there fairly easy, again, without getting wet. So
They're basically like a floating dock that just sits on top of the water, and that slot that you put your kayak in just helps you get out farther into the water without having to get wet. Or say somebody who has problems getting with stability on their kayak. These are shaped so that it is very stable. So if you have
they're
problems
kind of
with, like hips or knees or anything like that, it's easier to get in and out of the boat from that.
They work really well. I've
Yeah.
used my Oakwood several times. And they're just nice.
And some lakes like Pickerel, Glacial Lakes up there have a lot of rocks. So the shorelines aren't, there's not a lot of beaches and stuff. And so it's kind of hard to get down to the water in the first place. So